Yeah, no, I mean it is kind of crazy just how crucial of a foundational thing working out is for whether it's like for me or for other people, but like how you feel throughout the day, your confidence, body image. Like even for me, like I've had ADHD since first grade, and I guess for the past like 2 months I haven't been taking Adderall or anything, and it's been wild to me how much more focused and better I feel about knocking things off my list when I start the day with
Mm.
going to Orange Theory or lately I've joined a new gym and I'm hitting the stair climber, getting that booty, and then hitting the weights, but that just pushing through kind of those walls early in the morning or late at night really just makes such a significant impact on
Yeah, yeah,
the
that's
day and the week in general.
well, that's great to hear, and just in specifics to you, because I know kind of your journey with that has been a tough one. Just like just throughout your years in school and everything, and I think that that kind of impact that you're describing is like it's not a measurable thing, but in some ways it's like the only thing.
Yeah,
If you know what I mean, just stacking those daily wins. Um,
yeah. I
you
mean, Soko and I always joke. For people listening who don't know, Joe Sokolowski, my roommate, he and I always joke that if I was in the shape that I'm in now when I was playing college lacrosse, that I would be like an All-American. Or if I had the work ethic now that I didn't then. And our Coach Jay, would always be like, you just don't get it. And I didn't really get it at the time, but now I'm coaching JV lacrosse here in Utah.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, the Brighton I guess the Brighton JV offense
How are
gonna
you
be running a little bit tighter.
how are you enjoying that?
So far it's pretty good. We're just in fall ball, but it's been fun to kind of get out there and see. I mean, it's funny to think how young high schoolers are, and just like hear their daily conversations,
Hmm.
and trying to get them to focus, and
Hmm.
just put myself in their shoes and be like, I was so much more focused when I was your age, but no, I was chatting away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, how do I reach these kids?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, what you're describing with I've had many similar moments where I think to myself, "Oh, what if if I only knew this thing at that time, where would I be?" And I was hanging with Dan this past weekend, and we were talking about similar things in relationship to just previous relationships that we've had, and just like
mm,
kind of how we screwed relationships up and how we're so much more different now. And the point that I was kind of bringing up was that obviously beyond it being an impossibility that you could have possibly had the knowledge then that you do now, to me it's kind of like the only reason that you are in a position now to be able to look back on that is because of the transition that you've had. And if you were never at that point, like there are plenty of people who had that ability that you're describing that you were maybe missing. They had the sort of natural athleticism, but they just didn't give a shit. Or maybe they really gave a shit and they were hurt and there was nothing that they could do about it, right? So
mm,
I don't know. There's just, I think that everything, in terms of the whole looking back thing, it's like, even if you're in a situation now that's maybe less than, you would want in terms of, your business or finance or like personal relationships, it's like, all these things that are happening now, it's a very cool thing to imagine for me. It feels like video game esque. All the things that are happening now, you're always going to be looking back on, thinking those same things. And if you're not thinking those same things in terms of like the distance that you've covered, then that's the sign that like something needs to change. But as to me, as long as you're continually being like, what the fuck was I saying? Last year, like to me, that's
yeah.
that's the sign of progress more than like more than anything else. And one of the things that you mentioned a little earlier was Alex Hormozzi's content, and
Mm,
he is like a spectacle because he is just. I mean, most people point to his consistency, and he's hard. He's got all his hard work, and he's so well articulated, and he's fucking jacked. Like, how is he doing all this at the same time? He just doesn't stop. Alex to me seems like someone who um, is plagued by that like productive itch where it feels to me like Alex's day is just totally centered around all of the things that people know him for. And so it's like this perpetual cycle of, he puts out content, he gets this great response, and so he needs to put out more. And because then he's put out more content and people love the fact that he's putting out more content, then he has to put out more. It's the same thing with money. It's like the numbers just keep scaling up. And so I think that is something that if it happens on a like a smaller scale for us mortals around here, I think that just process of doing maybe not necessarily more, but just sort of refining what is and looking for feedback and getting that feedback back at us is like that's what allows you to be able to look back at Joe in college, that very process and be like, if only I, was in the shape that I'm in now. And so to me, much like Alex will say is like, if you're not looking back that way, then, that's the problem. It's not the fact that you're saying it in the first place.
Yeah. No, I think looking back, like, I forget who I was listening to, but they talked a lot about um, what do you, the question they posed was, what do you want your next decade to look like? And that really made me think about what my last decade was like. And obviously, it was a very turbulent decade in terms of just going through high school and college and the passing of my mom, and then
Yep.
moving out to Utah, and then going to LA and trying to work on music, and then back to New Jersey, and then just kind of like a lot of what now I like to think about is just learning, whether or not is learning what I don't like or do like, or where I function well, what feels like home, as well as just like dealing with challenges. And so I feel like the last decade was a lot of kind of figuring out what not to do, or I guess it's always just a learning decade, but taking the next decade and applying everything that I learned. I mean, it sounds so basic when you talk about it, but really just like eliminate, like in October, like I'm going on a year of like not using Zyn or like vaping or anything like that, and getting off those kind of nicotine devices. And like just trying to form better habits, drinking more water, going to bed on time, like taking those kind of 1% better aspects and moving them into the next decade, and just seeing how those positive habits kind of compound.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things you said there was that you've been learning what not to do, and I think that those kinds of things, whatever you're imagining, are infinitely more valuable. Hopefully, this background noise isn't too loud. Those kinds of things
Sorry.
um, are infinitely more valuable to me than doing something and like it being a success. It's like you heard the platitude of like, you don't learn from your successes, you learn from your failures, those kinds of things. You definitely don't learn from your failures unless you're very intentional about reflecting on them. And I think that description of you learn what not to do, that to me is defined by a reflection of failure. And so that to me is far more as a far more difficult thing to do, is to admit that like maybe this thing that I used to do was not particularly good for me, and maybe this other thing is better. That's like an admission of, oh, I was wrong about this thing, or I acknowledged I was able to bring to light this flaw in myself. And that's a much scarier, more difficult thing to do than to just have these like streams of successes. Like you see this with people who become very popular very quickly, so that not to we don't need to name names, but like just celebrities that just
Yeah.
blow up now. Like why are they all miserable? Why are they all depressed? Why does it seem like every person who should be the happiest, appears to be the happiest at least, ends up being like the least happy person? To me, it's like it's not a very human thing for know people to know you, and then everyone in the world all of a sudden knows you, and you have no ability to like have that timeline of learning those things that you're describing. And so all of a sudden you're put in this circumstance where you have none of the tools that you should have at that in that position. And it makes sense to me why so many of those people end up like crumbling. Like think about the people that, like Joe Rogan is a good example.
Hmm.
Joe seems to be someone who has not changed in this, I mean, at least from a superficial presentation sort of a way. it doesn't seem like fame has really changed the way that he operates. And you hear that in like in how he describes his daily activities, and like he's a family man. He just loves talking about his dog. Like he's just a normal guy. And I think it's because he only really rose to fame after he had like basically lived a life. You know what I mean? And so I think that
Yeah.
that's a really good maybe current day example of how that actually plays out in like a person who is in the spotlight.
Yeah, it seems like Joe had that time to kind of, I mean, seems like he lived an entire life really before having an Instagram profile with a million views was more common than not. But those people that kind of blow up very fast is they get that you should have known better right away, and it's like, how on earth would I have known that? And why am I facing the repercussions of someone that should have had 10 years to prepare for making this mistake? There's not a lot of grace on the internet
No,
given out to
no,
people.
absolutely not. And I have experienced this at an infinitely smaller scale than like any of those types of people, but I have experienced enough of like the internet hate thing to know that when you are putting out content, when you are constantly putting yourself out there, uh, all of your mistakes, all of the things that maybe you once thought were super right and accurate, all of the things that you maybe said even a couple months ago, they're all like out there for people to see. So what people can do is they can go back 2 years, in the library timeline and be like, oh, you said this over here. Look out. And now look what you're saying. Like you were wrong before. And I'm like, at first I was like, oh man, yeah, that's really embarrassing. Like that kind of stings a little bit for people to say that. But, all of your mistakes and all of your, sort of low lights, if you will, when you're putting out content and when you're in we'll call it the public eye, uh, they're for everyone to see. And it's not a very good feeling when, people call those kinds of things out. And I feel like that has been one of the biggest, I think, benefits to me of like this whole social media thing has just been like, uh, a greater capacity to reflect in a way that is more objective and less emotional. And what I mean by that is like when you're in this whole social media game, you either get like sucked into it and consumed by it, or you're kind of forced to do a lot of like self work, we'll call it, like reflection. And to me, I've kind of felt like I have used social media to my advantage in people calling those things out in me, and me being okay with people calling those things out, because most of the time, to be honest, it's true. Like if you ever get mad at something that someone says in an online context, especially, sometimes of course it's just mindlessly hateful and people are crazy. But a lot of the time it's like you only get mad because you're seeing truth in what they say. So to the point about the Rogans and everything, and the people who have maybe sort of developed a life prior to social media, had life experiences before social media. For me, like my life experience so far has been heavily influenced by social media in a way that I wouldn't have expected, in that I've been able to kind of extract a lot of like, I guess, faults in myself from the kinds of ways that I interact with Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and whatever other app, right? It's like, it's somewhat of a cool thing to be able to put a spin on like the constant negativity, to use it almost in a way that is making me better and making me more self-aware. So anyway, the broad point there was just to say, like, I think that it's a super valuable thing to learn from the mistakes that other people call out. And for me, social media has been a big help, and I am almost grateful for the critics, if you will, for that reason. But I think that a lot of the time when people get sucked into it, they get consumed by it in a way that is almost wholly counterproductive, and in a way that is unrealistic in terms of the degree of seriousness with which these things are taken. So I don't really know how that even started. I kind of went
No,
tangential there.
you you brought it right back around. It started of me learning from the last decade and taking that into the
Oh yeah,
next
yeah.
decade. And it
There you go.
seems like you you learn from every comment that you're getting on how to make your content better, which before we're done, I was curious because like what most people might not see now on your feed is, I guess they'll see the occasional meme, but how you really got started was through educating people through making memes about fitness. Because I mean, everyone's still on their phone so much, but during COVID, it's felt like my screen time was 6 hours a day,
Yeah.
and so it seemed like a very easy way to educate people and get them to engage with your content. Do you outsource anything for your content? I think you use Canva because I saw
Yeah.
one post about your cohort presentations being
Yes.
200 slides long.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
Very the keen eye, Joseph. Keen eye. Um,
Thank you, thank you.
yeah. No, I don't outsource anything. Um, I think that, and that's a really good transition actually, because it's one of the things that has. I think I've been able to relay a lot to my real life, which is just the willingness to the willingness to try new things. More recent, like you've known me for a long time. I'm not really someone who likes to try new things, and so like especially in the content realm of things, for a long time, like you're saying, like I was kind of using that meme format, and I'm not saying that I won't go back to it or anything, but that's, I think, really how I differentiated myself from people who were doing and saying similar things, is just through that format and that line of communication. And I think that memes are a great way to communicate, at least on a surface level, a particular idea, because a lot of people, when they see particular memes, are not seeing an image. They're seeing like a story around the image, and people love stories. People like to share stories, and so my logic back then was basically just like, okay, should I go about this as everyone else is, which is like I'm doing these reels and I'm making these flashy transitions, and I'm doing these voiceover things, or should I go the route of like just saying fuck all that. I'm gonna use tweet posts, and I'm gonna use random images that I search for. Uh, a lot of the time, I would just type in meme that is good for, and then I would type in an idea or an emotion or something like that. And so that was just a cool creative process to kind of like introduce myself, I guess, to more people. And just simply because of the novelty behind that, like in the fitness space, like no one was really doing that in the fitness space. That was an idea that I had just stolen from other areas of the
Hmm.
internet, because people have been making memes for however long. And so that was kind of where I started. But what has happened specifically with Instagram over the course of the last even year or so, like it's just way different from a content creator a content creator's perspective, specifically because of not only like all these other platforms competing at a higher level, like YouTube Shorts as an example, in the last like couple of years has like risen from not existing whatsoever to now YouTube Shorts is like this massive thing that people are getting paid to do. Just fewer people are on Instagram, and fewer people on your Instagram feed are seeing your content as a product of following you, which is like a weird thing to
Yeah.
say. But what I've observed is like the more and more time that has gone by, the fewer people that already follow me are the fewer the people that already follow me are the people that seeing my content. So it's
It's more
like,
new people are
right,
seeing the content.
right. It's more like I need to basically make this piece of content for an audience member that I don't even know exists yet. So that's kind of how the framework has had to change. And to be honest, the reason that the strategy has changed is just because I saw that strategy starting to slow down. And I was like, okay, and I stuck with it for a long time after I felt like it was slowing down. And I kind of recognized that the reason that I was sticking with the same thing was only just because it had previously worked, which from a logical standpoint, there's no reason to believe that what has previously worked will work again, right? I mean, there are principles like gravity that we can probably rely on, to continue to work the same way. But when it comes to Instagram, it's like it's kind of a shit show. So, in the past like couple of weeks, what I've been doing is I had just been making those short form bits. I've been putting less effort into each piece of content and just getting more total content out. And then I've just been posting it across every platform that I can post it on, specifically so that I have more total content
More
mathematically.
surface area.
Yeah.
And
Um,
do you bulk create,
no,
like film all your, okay, so it's kind of one-offs?
yeah. So I'm not sure, and this is obviously all with the grain of salt of like, this is just what I'm doing and what I like to do,
Yeah.
which is subject to change. But I think what I base like reels off of now is I only like, I have a hard rule now, and I didn't always have this hard rule, is I only make reels about an idea or a problem or a question that strikes me. So, for example, I'll give you a real example today. I was in the gym doing my lift, and I see someone doing this exercise over just with their client, this person I don't know, and all of a sudden an idea comes into my head, like, oh, they should be doing it this other way. So that is an example of just something that organically, and I think that there is weirdly something to that, that like if that is something that occurs organically in your own mind, that is something that organically may resonate with a lot of other people. It seems to make sense, just intuitively. And so I only
Yeah.
really just make reels that come about through that process of just like, here's an idea that just had this random launch pad in my brain. Let me just see if I can find a way to put it into a video and to package it in a way that is consumable, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, 100%. And I was thinking about like, it's also, I think that you have the most energy to kind of execute that video when it immediately comes to your mind and
Yeah.
you have an hour to make it. Even when like I've signed myself up to do 100 of these episodes in my mind because I'm like, I'll know after 100 whether it's one, helping me figure out what I want to do, two, helping others, or three, um, growing in any way that would be valuable to continue on past 100 episodes after talking to 100 people.
Hmm.
But immediately when thinking about how to record this, I mean, obviously you start with a Zoom or this Squadcast software because it's the most reliable way. Like, it sure would have been nice to come with three cameras and fly to Jersey City and sit down with you.
Yeah.
But my immediate thought was season two, I would have loved to set up three cameras and be in the gym with you. And for
Hmm.
every question, being taught a new proper workout,
Yeah.
getting my form critiqued.
That would be kind of cool. And hey, listen, if however many years down the line it ends up being like, maybe this is just your gig and maybe this is what you do, and maybe I have the Modern Meathead, CEO facility.
HQ,
And yeah, the HQ somewhere, we pull up to the HQ, we do exactly that. That would be fun.
the meat house.
The meat house. Yeah, I mean, we'll work on that. We'll bookmark that. And so far as the naming,
I don't think the meat house is it, but
yeah, it's a starting
it's
point.
got legs.
Yeah, it's a launch
Yeah.
pad. It's a launch pad. Um,
Put a pin in it, circle back,
yeah, yeah.
parking lot it.
But I do think that to the point of the reels in the surface area, I like the way that you describe that of content. Is I literally just wasn't doing that. Like I just wasn't posting to other platforms because I was like, I like Instagram and Instagram is comfortable for me. And it's a very rarely the case that I see a piece of content and that piece of content resonates in a way with me where I immediately change my behavior. And like I've been doing this, I don't know how long, 2 weeks now, or whatever it is. So it's like, usually I find that if a behavior is not going to stick, it disappears after like 2 or 3 days for me. So good sign so far. But the piece of content that I saw was it was a YouTube video, it was a speech that Gary Vaynerchuk gave
Hmm.
at I don't know where he was. It was a recent thing, and it was about content creation. And he was like, a lot of you are making content now on one platform because you like that platform and you're comfortable with it, and you're not posting to other platforms because you're unwilling to deal with lower views and deal with fewer like counts and deal with fewer comments and less engagement. Uh, and he was basically just like calling me out of my bullshit. So I was like, oh my God, let me just change that ASAP. And so now I'm posting across multiple platforms. And I think a helpful way, maybe just as like a practical tip in terms of the content stuff, is you definitely have to pay attention to some degree to audience response, but putting more stock in it than you need, which is a tricky balance to find, is really, really, really unhelpful, because what ends up happening is people end up making content that they're not themselves interested in. And
Hmm.
by definition, that only will last so long. And so
Yeah.
just that framework of looking at it more like a math equation than like, looking to go viral. It's like, well, if I just post, 2 pieces of content a day across 5 platforms every day, which basically takes no more time than posting on one platform, right? You just click the next app, post, 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 or maybe you use one of those fancy other apps that post it to all of them. I don't know how that works. I haven't used it, but you all of a sudden you go from 7 pieces of content a week to 70, and it's like just the pure amount of the way that math works out. It's like it's not a comparable thing, and it's basically no more effort, and it's just as sustainable. So as long as you are enjoying the content that you're making and you feel that you are helping people, you can be assured that the math will work out in favor of what you're doing. Number one, and that number two, as long as you are comfortable with the value that you're providing, the view count, the like count becomes an afterthought. It's like there's no more relevant piece of content that you could make than one that is valuable in some way. And so I think that people who are overly concerned, and this has been me previously, with view count, like count, all those things, uh, maybe should ask themselves just how valuable their content actually is. And I think to some degree, like in this economy, yeah, it's very saturated. Yeah, you probably need to know some people. But I think for the most part, people that are consistent always just end up coming out, above the other people that are just not, doing it with that amount of frequency and magnitude and effort. Um,
They see the gains.
they see the gains. Exactly. They see the new bicep vein. They're like, she, I'm going to,
That's a new follower.
yeah, that's a new follower. There you go.
Dude, thank you for jumping on and chatting with me. I was
It's been a pleasure.
so happy to. I know I was so happy when I was going. I had my little guest list over here, and I got to change my status from I think yes to definitely yes. And I really wanted to catch up with you after this time and all these different life events. I do want to give you an opportunity to tell the people what you have going on your page.
Oh, I guess I would say that if you work out and you lift weights and you like to lift weights, you should check my page out. And I won't say any more than that because if it, I don't know, like if people find my page, they find my page, or kind of organically. If they don't, they don't. I feel like it'll work out however it's going to work out. But if you want to go see my website and you want to buy my stuff, just type in my name on the internet. It'll probably come up. And,
You've done a great job with your SEO.
oh, thank you.
You're the first result. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, didn't do that at all intentionally. I think it's just a volume thing, but like I said, a lot of this stuff has not been planned, nor will it be, planned. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me, though. My name, and I'm happy to talk to someone that I know.
Yanes.
Yeah, because you know how to say my last name. It's interesting, like. I think
Yanes.
I don't know how many podcasts I've done at this point. It's probably not too many, but it's probably not less than 20. And in terms of just who I've been a guest on, and I would say you and maybe one or two other people said Giannis, and the rest said Yanes. And it's always an awkward thing, because it's like the beginning of the podcast. Do I correct them? It's their podcast. That's a little embarrassing. Maybe they should have done the research, kind of a thing. But